Now, a recent report from health organizations around the world found that we haven't prepared enough for the health impacts of these fires. The report also found that Canada is lagging behind in planning for the increase in forest fires, smoke, and illness. So for more on those health impacts of climate change, we're joined by Dr. Courtney Howard in Yellowknife. Dr. Howard is an emergency room physician and past president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, one of the groups that worked on that report. Dr. Howard, welcome to the program. First off, what are your thoughts as we see these forest fires continue in British Columbia and in Lytton as well?
It's tragic, and my thoughts go out to everybody in BC who's experiencing this. Wildfires, as we see, can be associated with evacuation, which can lead to PTSD and lingering anxiety. We know that trauma and deaths are very possible from the actual flames themselves. And the clouds of smoke that go up into the air are increasingly shown to impact overall mortality. And there's been many studies, including one we did here in Yellowknife, showing that they increase asthma exacerbations, visits to the emergency department for cough, pneumonia, and outpatient dispensations for breathing problems.
Now, one of the things, too, is Canada preparing enough for maybe the length of time that we're going to see the fire season now? It's much longer this year, as we hear from our own meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaff.
Right. So the Environment and Climate Change Canada report, Canada's Changing Climate, that came out in 2019 shows us that we need to expect continuing increasing temperatures at least into mid-century. And so what that means is we have an adaptation sprint, and we really need a new national adaptation strategy. There's a new coalition that the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment has just become part of that's called the Climate Proof Canada Coalition. And so we need to move the reality of continuing increasing temperatures into our common vision of the future. I think in some cases, the fact that we've already signed up for increasing temperatures at least until mid-century has been lost in our national conversation. We need essentially to, number one, sprint to adapt to the impacts of climate change we can no longer now avoid, and have a second mitigation sprint, which allows us to emergently decrease greenhouse gas emissions so that in the latter part of the century, when today's newborns are in their 50s and 60s, we don't continue to go up, but we can stabilize temperatures.
And when you look at what Canada's doing now, what does it have to do differently immediately?
Well, the right now situation is, primary care providers need to proactively refill their breathing medicines because we know it's likely to be a smoky summer. Public health and municipal leaders need to prepare clean air shelters and evacuation shelters for the people that we know are going to need clean air in which to exercise and to socialize, and also to stay in if they need to leave their homes. And of course, we need to see our national leaders, such as I understand we'll soon be discussing this with you, allocating additional resources to make sure that all of these evacuation situations, particularly when done in the overlapping health context of COVID-19, are done appropriately to all public health standards that are necessary.
Yeah, Dr. Howard, let me just ask you some practical advice for people who are in this situation. We can see the smoke in the pictures there. What's your advice to them?
So it's important to, number one, know what your evacuation plan is. I was recently in the parking lot of the hospital in Fort McMurray, and it wasn't until I was standing there that I appreciated how close the fire got. There were burned trees in two directions visible from the parking lot. They managed to heroically evacuate that hospital in a matter of hours. It's an over 100-bed facility. So people who are in charge of facilities like that in the affected area need to look at their evacuation plan. How many ambulances are there in your town? How many buses? Can you get a hold of the people who know where the buses are on a weekend if necessary? Those plans really need to be in place and well communicated to the population. What we found in the study we did in Yellowknife, we did a quantitative study that showed that we had a full doubling of emergency department visits for asthma. And we also did a qualitative study that asked people how they felt during the summer. And so people did feel, anxious and stressed out, and they had less activity than normal. But another very clear thread was that the people who knew what to do felt way better. The people who said, yes, I fire smarted my home. I removed all the brush from my eaves. I made sure that there was no dry brush around my house. I had the evacuation plan on my table. I had my bags packed. I knew where to go. I lined up a boat, if they had a boat, to make sure that I had an additional evacuation plan in case the highway got closed. Those people, their entire interview was different. So I really encourage people to prepare as much as they can.
Okay, Dr. Howard, I want to thank you for this.